The final two social institutions that we're going to take a look at are the economy and government. I kind of cover these quickly because, at least for those of you students who have graduated from Indiana high schools, I'm sure you've had an entire semester talking about the economy and talking about government. So we kind of go through this relatively quickly. It's kind of interesting because these two social institutions are so related. They are probably the two closest related institutions that you can imagine. When you consider that the government sets rules and expectations, and basically they control the economy, and then the success of the economy determines the success of government. So if the economy is sour, government is looked at as not being very effective. And so these two go hand in hand together. Let's take a look. In terms of economy, okay, the economic system refers essentially to the social institution through which goods and services are produced, distributed, and consumed. That's the manifest function, is the production and distribution of goods and services. Two basic types of economic systems distinguish contemporary industrial societies such as capitalism and socialism. Now, capitalism is an economic system in which the means of production are largely in private hands, and the main incentive for economic activity is the accumulation of profit. That's what people are trying to get, is they're trying to make a profit. In practice, capitalist systems vary to the degree in which government regulates private ownership and economic activity. So, in other words, government does put certain regulations on industry and so forth, on businesses, but we'll talk about that just in a second here. Socialist theory was refined in the writings of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Now, under socialism, the means of production and distribution in a society are collectively owned. The basic objective of the economic system is to meet people's needs, such as providing national health care, providing housing, education, and other key services. Marx believed that socialism would eventually evolve into communism. He kind of viewed communism as an ideal type. Now, when you look at the economic system, okay, let's talk about capitalism, for example. Government does intervene in capitalism to some degree. They'll try to regulate monopolies because monopolies violate the idea of free enterprise. They'll put regulations in place, antitrust legislation that is aimed at stopping monopolies in the United States. Through the 1800s, especially latter 1800s and early 1900s, in our country, we practiced what's called laissez-faire economics. And that was where government, for the most part, had a hands-off policy on business. And what you saw in the late 1800s and early 19s was several businesses actually developed into monopolies because of that lack of regulation by the government. Sorry for the pause there. I was trying to think of my example that I was going to give. In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, we had up to a third of our workforce that were totally unemployed, had no jobs, nothing at all. And so under Franklin Roosevelt, FDR, they passed several acts known as the New Deal programs. And the New Deal programs, a lot of them were designed to put regulations back on businesses. And so the whole idea of laissez-faire economics kind of came to an end during the New Deal time period. Now, it's also kind of interesting to note that one of the most successful programs during the New Deal time period in the 1930s was the Tennessee Valley Authority, or otherwise known as the TVA. Some states and communities located around the Tennessee Valley area had a really difficult time getting electricity. So the TVA was a program designed to bring electricity to a lot of the rural areas in and around the Tennessee Valley. And the TVA is strictly regulated by the government. I mean, it's controlled by the government. The government controls and sets the prices for electricity. And what they found by doing this when they started the TVA was that they could produce electricity cheaper than most of the companies around the United States, the other utility companies, were providing it for their customers. So, in essence, it really reduced the overall cost of providing electricity. Now, the New Deal program of the TVA, okay, Tennessee Valley Authority, it was one of the most successful programs of the New Deal. It still exists today and still provides electricity for that same area. But what's interesting is we never duplicated that program anywhere else in the country. And the reason was because a lot of critics viewed the TVA as being a very socialistic type of program because the government was owning and controlling that utility. So we never duplicated it after that. Now let's talk about socialism again here real quick. Marx and Engels viewed capitalism as forcing people to exchange their labor for low wages, which basically allowed owners of industry to profit. Socialism seeks to eliminate economic exploitation. The means of production and distribution are collectively owned, and they meet the needs of the people rather than maximizing profits. So in other words, central government is the representative of the people. Now, Marx believed that eventually socialism would evolve into communism, where all property is communally owned. There'd be no distinction made about a person's ability to produce, or in other words, how productive they were. Everybody would get equal resources. Now, let's take a look at government, different types of government. And when we talk about government, we're talking about power, the ability to control others. Power is at the heart of the political system, and the struggle for power and authority inevitably involves politics. To answer the question, who gets what, when, and how? Now, if you look at the extremes on the government continuum, at one end, you have a democratic form of government where the power is given to the people. The people decide. On the other end, you have the authoritarian type of government where all power is controlled by the state. Now, in reality, there's a whole lot of different degrees to this. And if we look at this political spectrum, it kind of gives you an idea down here. For example, a democracy, the form of democracy that we have, it's not total. The people do not have total control. There's a lot of things that are voted on in Washington, D.C. that I don't even know about. Those decisions are made by representatives for us. So we choose our representatives, then our representatives make the choices for us. So it's kind of an indirect democracy in that regard. Now, sociologist C. Wright Mills, he argued that power rested in the hands of a very few people, both inside and outside government. And what he referred to there was called the power elite. C. Wright Mills believed that the power elite were leaders of military, leaders of industry, leaders of governmental agencies, and basically that group of people collectively control the fate of the United States. He suggested that the economically powerful people, coordinate their maneuvers with military and political establishments to basically serve their own common interest. So again, this kind of takes us back to the conflict perspective of who is the power elite, how much power do they have, and how much control do they have over us as a nation. Now, this brings us to the question, okay, where do we see America? All right. Now, America is a representative democracy. As I stated a minute ago, we choose representatives who then make decisions for us. We're a capitalist economic system. So we, try to basically make a profit. Everybody has the right to start a business and to try and make a profit, but there are some governmental regulations. How good of a system is this? Is America number one? If you look around the world, how do you compare? How do you even make that kind of a decision whether America is number one or not? We're going to examine that question actually in class when we get to this.